Tonight, coronavirus relief for America. President Trump signs a measure from Congress, a look at what it includes. And the balance of power in the Senate rests in the hands of Georgia voters.
Georgia has the power to decide where we go from here.
The latest in the Senate runoff elections. Plus,
I absolutely believe that transformative justice will occur. And the reason why is because I think that people are awake and paying attention.
The push to reform a controversial mandatory sentencing law. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Coronavirus relief finally coming to Americans. Good evening and thanks for joining us for Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup. Well, President Trump's signature on Congress's latest COVID relief bill means help officially is on the way for millions of people and businesses across the country. Senior Washington correspondent Tara Mergener is here with the update. Tara, I'm sure a lot of people feeling relieved.
I would imagine so, John. That's right. The president signed the bill after resisting for nearly a week after an 11th hour demand for $2,000 stimulus checks. But he's still insisting there is not enough money in it to help financially strapped Americans.
With just hours to go before the deadline, President Trump signs the $2.3 trillion coronavirus relief and government funding bill. In a statement saying, I am signing this bill to restore unemployment benefits, stop evictions, provide rental assistance, add money for the Paycheck Protection Program, and much more. The package includes $600 checks for Americans who earn less than $75,000 a year, plus enhanced unemployment benefits.
I worry and I care about myself and my family. We need COVID relief so bad.
It also provides funding for small businesses and vaccine distribution and averts a looming government shutdown. Congress spent 6 months working on the bipartisan bill. The president's own team, including Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, helped negotiate it. But last week, the president saying,
it really is a disgrace.
Some Republicans criticized the president for not speaking up before the legislation was overwhelmingly approved by both parties.
If you want to make a $2,000 check, negotiate that from the beginning.
I understand he wants to be remembered for advocating for big checks, but the danger is he'll be remembered for chaos and misery and erratic behavior if he allows this to expire.
But some senators are also rallying behind a measure to boost direct payments.
The American people want $2,000. They need it, given the economic crisis.
However, the extra money may not stand much chance with the Republicans in the Senate. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell only saying the president's leadership has prevented a government shutdown at a time when our nation could not have afforded one. Meanwhile, it's not clear how soon Americans will receive those checks. John.
All right. Thank you, Tara Mergener. Well, meanwhile, the number of coronavirus cases in America continues to soar with more than 150,000 new cases Sunday and 118,000 hospitalizations. December is already the deadliest month since the outbreak began here in the United States. And with holiday travel and gatherings, doctors warn it'll only get worse.
We're really at a very critical point. As we get into the next few weeks, it might actually get worse.
Even if you traveled, it doesn't mean you just throw your hands up in the air and say, oh, well. There are measures that you can take, and the CDC, I'd like to remind people, recommends that 3 to 5 days after travel or after you've been around people without a mask on, you go out and get tested.
Vaccines continue to roll out across the country, still first being administered to frontline workers and those in long-term care facilities. Well, just over a week now away from the crucial runoff election in Georgia, both parties are sending in political heavyweights to sway voters in the Peach State, where a pair of races will determine the balance of power in the Senate. CBN's Eric Phillips has been following the election closely. Eric, President Trump's planning another trip to Georgia a week from today.
Yeah, John, this will be his second trip to Georgia to campaign for Senators Loeffler and Perdue. Ironically, some believe that his involvement may hurt more than help in an election where turnout is everything.
One of the president's latest tweets announced, on behalf of two great senators, David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, I will be going to Georgia on Monday night, January 4th, to have a big and wonderful rally. so important for our country that they win. But some Trump supporters may be prompted to shy away from the polls because of his get out the vote message being overshadowed by his rhetoric.
They cheated and they rigged our presidential election.
Just a week and a half ago, the vice president also stumped in Georgia.
And I'm here because we stand with Senator David Perdue and Senator Kelly Loeffler. We're going to keep fighting. We're going to keep fighting for every legal vote in America.
Not to be upstaged, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris appeared in the Peach State just days before Christmas, on the trail to rally support for Democrats Jon Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock.
Everything is at stake. Everything that was at stake in November is at stake, leading up to January 5th.
She followed her soon-to-be boss, who was there days earlier.
It's time to stand up, take back our democracy. Send me these two men, and we will control the Senate, and we will change the lives of people in Georgia.
Georgia was thrust into the national spotlight after none of the candidates in the state's two Senate races won 50% of the vote on November 3rd. Now, Loeffler and Warnock and Perdue and Ossoff are going head-to-head in these state races with national implications. More than 2 million Georgians have voted early since December 14th.
It has certainly brought a lot of attention to the state of Georgia, and it really drives home the fact of how important it is to get out and vote.
A lot of attention indeed, and I have been studying several of the recent polls, and granted, they all have to be taken with a grain of salt, right? Some have the Republicans ahead, some say Democrats are on top, but there's one thing that they all agree on, and that is that candidates in both races are within a few razor-thin percentage points of one another, which means this will continue to be a very tight race all the way down to Election Day on January 5th, John.
And people watching those polls closely. Thank you, CBN's Eric Phillips. Well, although the November election may not have turned out the way President Trump and his supporters had hoped, Republicans still did well overall, led by successful conservative women candidates with important gains in the United States House. CBN's Jennifer Wishon has more.
Of the 14 seats Republicans flipped in the House, 10 were won by women, mostly in urban and suburban parts of the country. As Congresswoman Susan Brooks prepares to retire from Congress, she leaves a legacy after successfully recruiting and helping elect a new slate of conservative women to Congress.
More and more conservative women wanted to raise their hand and say, groups like AOC and the Squad do not represent my views. I need to step up and to put my conservative views and how I have contributed to my community forward. I need to make sure that the electorate has another choice.
After the 2018 midterms led to huge Republican losses, party leaders vowed to stop the gravitation of women to the Democratic Party. Leaders like Kevin McCarthy and Kathy McMorris Rodgers directed more money to conservative women candidates and made electing them a priority. A record 228 women ran, with 94 winning their primaries.
The women, I think, just had messages that resonated, and they knew their districts.
Republican strategists say this will help change the reputation of the GOP being the party of old white men.
The Republican Party is diverse, and I think that you're starting to see that reflected in the candidate recruitment.
So what can we expect in the 2022 midterms?
I would much rather be Leader McCarthy than Speaker Pelosi or whoever comes behind her.
That's because after the 2010 census, Republican majorities in state houses across the country dominated the drawing of congressional districts. And there are still a number of districts Trump won in 2016 that haven't flipped yet. Add that to the great migration from liberal strongholds as more and more Americans leave states like New York and California. Those states will continue to lose congressional seats that could go to Republican strongholds. For now, Democrats have seen their House majority diminished. And once again, Best says the elites got it wrong.
I think the conventional wisdom in Washington, D.C. and New York City was that President Trump was so unpopular, he was going to lose by a wide margin, and he was going to tank Republicans in the process, and that simply didn't occur.
Meanwhile, Congresswoman Brooks is retiring and will fittingly be replaced by a Republican woman who happened to beat another woman running as a Democrat. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. The amazing discovery from ancient pilgrimages to the Holy Land. That story when Faith Nation returns.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug-of-war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline, Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
And welcome back. Israel entered its third nationwide COVID-19 lockdown over the weekend. Many Israelis went out Sunday for last-minute shopping and visiting before most stores and restaurants closed late Sunday afternoon. The closure is scheduled to last 2 weeks with the possibility of an extension. The reaction to the lockdowns has been mixed. The lockdown sending more than 20% of the population into unemployment. On the vaccine front, Israel has vaccinated more than 250,000 Israelis in just 1 week. Officials are targeting more than 100,000 vaccinations daily. At that rate, more than half the population would be vaccinated in about 2 months' time. Well, the Israel Museum in Jerusalem has revealed a rare find this Christmas season, a token that likely was a memento of a pilgrimage to Bethlehem by Christians dating back to 1,400 years ago. CBN's Julie Stahl explains from Israel.
They're called eulogia tokens, small souvenirs that Christians collected on pilgrimages to the Holy Land.
I'm holding a miniature token that used to belong to a 6th or 7th century pilgrim that came here and do a journey. We have here the nativity scene, so he probably visited Bethlehem.
Here in the archaeology wing of the Israel Museum, they have a reconstruction of an early church from the Holy Land. They also have items that show that pilgrims from way back then wanted to take souvenirs back with them, just like they do today. Assistant curator Morag Wilhelm discovered this rare piece in a large collection that had been donated to the museum.
We can see Jesus, the baby Jesus, and also the ox and the ass, but they are inside architectural building. And we think that this building is the Church of the Nativity.
The souvenirs were made of earth taken from holy sites. This one is unique because Mary and Joseph are not in the picture, and it's likely depicting the cave under the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. That makes it a combination of the historical event from the birth of Jesus and a depiction of a place a few centuries later.
So this combination is very rare in the case of Bethlehem. We have it here in Jerusalem, but from the Holy Sepulchre, but not from Bethlehem.
Christians have been making pilgrimages to places mentioned in the Bible for at least 1,700 years. In one historical writing, the church father St. Jerome relates the story of a woman from Rome named Paula. Then she entered the cave of the Savior and saw the stable where the ox knew his master and the ass his Lord's manger. Then she solemnly declared in my own hearing that, with the eyes of faith, she saw a child wrapped in swaddling clothes, weeping in the Lord's manger.
So we guess that we are seeing here, it's this special visualization or religious experience that you go to the holy place and you actually see baby Jesus in the cave of Bethlehem.
Other tokens depict the baptism of Jesus and the crucifixion and resurrection. There are small vials for oil and crosses, pendants, and rings. And while coronavirus may have closed down international travel for now, when the gates reopen, tourists and pilgrims are sure to return to Israel and the Holy Land. Julie Stahl, CBN News, the Israel Museum, Jerusalem.
Thank you, Julie. Still to come, ruining a shot at redemption. Why some say 3 strikes, you're in for life is a failure for the reform system.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to cbnnewschannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back. For decades, tough on crime legislation sent repeat nonviolent offenders to prison with life sentences, many locked up as teens or young adults. CBN's Caitlin Burke spoke with one former federal inmate about the law that put him behind bars in the fight to get him out.
It's really like hell, like how they describe hell. Nobody can hear you screaming, hear your screams. That's really how it is. I mean, you hear people screaming all night, and that's all I used to think about. We're in hell.
At the age of 28, a judge sentenced Herman Tate to life in prison without parole for a low-level, nonviolent drug offense.
Buried alive. Just imagine it, putting you in a casket and you're alive, but you can stand up and walk around in it. That's what it is. You can't get out.
Tate's sentence fell under the federal 3 strikes drug law passed by Congress in the 1980s. It states that if someone is charged with a federal drug crime and already has 2 prior drug offenses, then that's the 3rd strike, and a federal prosecutor can require the judge to impose a mandatory life sentence. Tate's first strike came in 1992 for selling half a gram of crack. His sentence, 6 months probation.
He gained his second strike 2 years later. That time, he sold 7.7 grams of cocaine. Sentenced to 5 years in prison, Tate was only required to serve 8 months. Then, in 1998, he struck out, charged with conspiracy to sell cocaine. Tate, however, had never heard of the 3 strikes drug law, and since no drugs were found in his possession, he chose to go to trial. The prosecutor filed what's known as an 851 notice.
That means that even if the judge wanted to take pity on you, even if the judge believed that you could be rehabilitated, even if the judge believed that the sentence was too harsh, that sheet of paper meant that you had to receive a mandatory life sentence without parole.
Life.
Wow.
For nothing.
Tate headed to federal prison, where it took 2 years for the gravity of his sentence to sink in.
I keep seeing people going home, and I'm like, man, and I realize, hey, I'm never going home. And it just hit me all of a sudden. And that's when I realized that I had a life sentence in the federal system.
The 3 strikes federal drug law covers all 50 states. Many states have gone further, expanding 3 strikes laws that impose mandatory life sentences for 3 convictions of certain felonies. In California, for example, the 1994 3 Strikes You're Out law was designed to keep murderers, rapists, and child molesters behind bars. Today, however, more than half sentenced under that law are serving life sentences for nonviolent crimes. Evidence that these 3 strikes laws can result in unintended consequences. My Angel Cody is an attorney and the director of the Decarceration Collective, a team of women fighting to free people sentenced to life in prison for drugs and end the policies that put them there. Many of her clients were teenagers or young adults when convicted with their 3rd strike, the mandatory life sentence that followed, basically erasing the possibility of maturation and growth, stamping them instead as irredeemable.
The most potent example of sort of the human spirit, right, is that we tell someone you're buried alive and you're never going to leave prison. And for the person to still have the audacity and the wherewithal to get up every day and to try to make some meaning of your life, I think is for me, it's deeply inspiring. It's why I do the work. It also is the most salient example of why we ought to go back and look at these different laws.
When Congress passed the Fair Sentencing Act in 2010, it provided the potential for a lower sentence, but did nothing for those already in prison. Then, in 2018, President Trump signed the First Step Act, which finally allowed the opportunity to reconsider prior sentences. In reading the new law, Tate regained a sense of hope for the first time in nearly 22 years.
And I'm like, oh, Lord, because it fit me. I fit the criteria.
Cody and her team officially requested his life sentence be reduced. This past January, Tate learned of his freedom.
I'm just watching the TV, and my case manager come out and called my name, Tate. Took my earbuds out. I'm like, yeah, what's up? She's like, you need to come to my office right now. I'm like, oh. So I go over there, and she turns around with a big smile on her face. I'm like, what's wrong with you? She said, Tate, you going home. I just started crying. I said, don't play. She said, I'm for real. I said, don't lie to me. And that's when I found out.
Still, an estimated 800 inmates could likely die in prison under the 3 strikes drug law. A disproportionate number of them are Black.
There are all these places along the highway towards imprisonment where people get off, right? And then there are on-ramps. And what we've seen is that disproportionately, it's more difficult for African Americans to exit off of that highway, right? And that more of them are on that highway towards mass incarceration and imprisonment. Some of that relates to charging decisions that are made. Some of that relates to the rates of arrest. Some of it relates to community resources that are available.
No legislation reforming the federal 3 strikes drug law includes those sentenced to life for marijuana convictions. But Cody believes change is coming.
I absolutely believe that transformative justice will occur. And the reason why is because I think that people are awake and paying attention.
Cody says now is the time for the American people to ask questions and put pressure on our elected officials. That's because voters can make a major impact at the ballot box and be the catalyst that keeps Cody's clients and many others from being buried alive behind bars. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Thank you, Caitlin. Up next, what's considered the opposite of holiday shopping and why it's in the spotlight? We explain when we come back.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5 Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Well, finally tonight, 'tis the season to return all the gifts you don't want. We all know Christmas is about giving, not receiving, but rest assured you're not alone if you have received something you just can't use. This week, the return race is on. The National Retail Federation estimates 1 in 10 gifts will be heading back to the store.
Either you get stuck with whatever you bought, or you put on your mask and you go and return it.
Of course, returning things is a little harder this year due to the pandemic. So many retailers are reminding everyone to wear a mask and maintain social distance. And others are offering curbside returns. All you have to do is pull up, park, and say goodbye to your unwanted gift. Well, the National Retail Federation says about 66% of shoppers will head to the stores to make a return this week. Well, thank you so much for joining us for Faith Nation. We hope to see you next time right here. Have a great night.